count up here. This is like the secret Easter egg for people that just watch it on YouTube because we leave a little bit for Cecil to cut. So every now and then we actually had we had about like a 7-minute period when Cecil was having technical difficulties, and I had to do story hour and started telling stories from my childhood. Maybe we'll end up back there today. But the people who listen to the podcast will never know. But they will know what we're about to say because we'll go live. 3, 2, 1. Will Kyler Murray be the fantasy football MVP this year? That and more this week on the couch. Mike Wright taking aim at Kyler Murray, number 1 fantasy football scorer to date. Will this persist?
Well, one of those two things. Like we had Kyler as our number 1 guy, so of course it's going to continue because it has just confirmed everything that I thought would happen in draft season. I think he has a tremendous chance. You looked back at what he was able to accomplish last year when he was on. I mean, he was cruising to be NFL MVP up to a certain point, and he was, depending on your scoring system, he was the number 1 quarterback up until the very end when, like Josh Allen, I think it was, just happened to steal it away. And fantasy football, the chunks of the season are so odd, right? Of the beginning is everything. And then, of course, the ending too, because that's when the championships are made. That's when the memories just are fully solidified of that person took me to a championship. And unfortunately for Kyler, he got his shoulder hurt in week 12 or 13. I don't have it in front of me, but he was playing against Seattle. And we're Arizona guys here. Yeah. So we're diehard Cardinal fans. And so we're watching everything. And everything changed for Kyler after that. The play style, the running went way down. He was not making the same throws. Like you could tell he was hurt. But up until that point, he was just absolutely melting faces, similar to the Lamar Jackson season of 3 years ago now are we at? So for him to finish number 1 overall, I don't think is a stretch by any imagination, because of a bad game from Kyler will still probably include 40-plus rushing yards. So that wipes out a lot of mistakes.
First, I want to say I'm really sorry about what happened to the Suns. I'm sorry. Well, no, because it was just.
It.
I don't have a dog in the NBA fight because I'm a Pittsburgh guy. I mean, I grew up in Pittsburgh, but at the same time, it was tough because I think it was one of those things when the fan base really believed. So getting that out of the way, Kyler Murray. We can go back to like Jake Plummer in the Rose Bowl or something if we want to go back really far. I think it was the Rose Bowl, maybe it was the Fiesta Bowl. I don't know. Anyway, at 46, I really shouldn't try to go more than like 5 years back in the past, right? Look. First of all, you're right. You nailed it about Kyler Murray and the injury. And the way I framed it this preseason is that proof that Kyler Murray can be the number 1 fantasy quarterback. It was actually Russell Wilson, who was neck and neck with him before the shoulder injury for number 1 fantasy quarterback. And that, brings up any number of things about Russ. But does the shoulder injury stand for the idea that, hey, without a shoulder injury, he's going to be the number 1 fantasy quarterback? Or does it stand for the idea that with his playing style, he's going to suffer some sort of injury that's going to affect his playing? Because some guys can play through injuries. Like we hear about Tom Brady's knee, in March or something. And other players like Kyler Murray, because so much of his game is predicated on incredible athleticism and the ability to have no fear, then if he's feeling a little bit of fear because he's protecting his shoulder, it changed. But he was back to his normal self by week 15, week 16. But then, Mike, I got carried away about a week or two before the season. And you're going to like this. The speech I was making basically is Kyler Murray is Michael Vick. And what I mean by that is he's impossible to defend. He's the best athlete on the field every time he's on the field. And defenses are going to have trouble preparing for him and really on any given play, like on the Rondale Moore touchdown last week. That's everything about the way everything about the way Kyler Murray plays quarterback. You would never teach anybody to play that way. And he's still just scratching the surface of what he can do because he doesn't even really have a process. His process is to just turn it into the scramble drill, basically. So it's super exciting. I want to encourage people to overpay for Kyler Murray right now, I think. because we might be seeing a monumental season, and everybody thinks you can just replace a quarterback. But if you're replacing with a 22-point bench scorer and Kyler Murray's out there putting up 35s every week, that's the biggest advantage in fantasy football, Kyler Murray. So on the flip side of that, because we can look back, Mike, it seems like forever ago that it was draft season. Even the Thursday night game between Washington and the Giants feels like forever ago, the way time passes during a season. But we had a clear top 5 at quarterback. Patrick Mahomes seems like he's going to be okay, even though Tyreek Hill got shut down by Anthony Averett. What's up with that?
I don't know.
Yeah, right. And also, Lamar Jackson's going to be okay. I wonder if he's going to break down under the load of the entire offense because he does not protect himself at all. But we also have 2 quarterbacks in the top 5, because there was a clear top 5, that aren't doing so well, or at least aren't returning on investment. Josh Allen and Dak Prescott. And this is leading to a larger topic of, because after week 1, you don't overreact to week 1. But after week 2, now we have 2 data points. In Dak's case, 1 data point was like last year against Tampa. He was the whole offense. The other data point was, whoa, balanced offense. Backfield by committee. The Cowboys actually playing within themselves instead of putting everything on Dak's shoulders. Are you worried about Dak this year living up to his billing?
No, not yet. Week 1, the throwing the 58 times, that's an anomaly of pass attempts. But I don't see Dallas that improved, where they're going to have these games where teams can just score at will on them, and then it will go back to it. The offense has to be Dak Prescott, and he has to be great. Mm-hmm. And despite his, it wasn't a terrible game for Dak. He didn't score, and the power of, I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but one of my 2 biggest gripes for fantasy football scoring is, number 1, quarterback rushing should not be divided you shouldn't get a point for 10 rushing yards and a point for 25 passing yards. It's right. The position. I don't and you play the game that you play the hand you're dealt. So we all know that in fantasy football you have to attack these rushing quarterbacks, because look at the Kyler versus Tom Brady right now. Mm-hmm. Tom Brady's already thrown 9 passing touchdowns, and he's been unbelievable. They're not the number 1 quarterback because he doesn't run, and it's just so overpowered. But the power of touchdowns, 6 points, it's so humongous, and it swings weeks for these players, where Dak completed 85% of his passes. He was throwing for almost 9 yards an attempt. Dak played well, but he didn't score a passing touchdown, so he submarined your fantasy lineup this weekend. On top of that, you didn't see any rushing attempts from Dak, which is weird. I think you could see in week 1 when he actually did run those handful of times, at least to me, he looked like a nervous man. He looked like a guy who was terrified of everything that he went through, the pain of the injury, the recuperation time of the injury, rehabbing the injury. It looked like that was not in the back of his mind, but at the forefront of his mind. And I think that as we go along, those worries will start to go away as he finally starts to trust his foot again. And we'll get those 4 to 5 rushing touchdowns for Dak, juice up his end-of-season numbers. But I'm not concerned moving forward with Dak. Josh Allen, though, is an interesting question, because our data, 2 weeks in, you can't make season proclamations yet. But he has not looked like he did 2 years ago. I think week 1 was 58% of his passes, and last week this past week was even worse. Now, variance hit. The Buffalo Bills finally scored some rushing touchdowns at the running back position. You had the big one from Singletary, and then 2 others from Zach Moss. So you put some touchdowns into what Josh Allen had done. He's perfectly fine. But the one of the questions of the offseason, when he got that huge contract, and you had to whisper, you couldn't say these things out loud, but you had to hide off screen and go, guys, he had one awesome year. And look back in the history of his career playing football. He's had one awesome year. What if that was the outlier? You know, but to say those things out loud, you look like a crazy person saying, well, you're going to doubt this transformation of that Josh Allen's completed. And you're like, well, he went from statistically the worst passer in football to one of the very best. And I get that Stephon Diggs was there, but one receiver doesn't transform a quarterback overnight into one of the worst passers to the best. So that was like one of those concerns that I had, and it's still kind of there because through 2 weeks, Josh Allen is like, look at Emmanuel Sanders. Mm-hmm. Sanders looks great for an old guy. His average depth of target is almost 20 yards. Josh Allen is not hitting him though, where
Nope.
Josh Allen of last year would have connected on those passes. At least we would project that he would have. And so far through 2 weeks, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Josh Allen. But if you drafted him in the 5th round, you have to be mildly concerned with what is taking place.
Absolutely. I mean, Washington this week. So, I mean, there's a glass half full, glass half empty take there, but it's not a bad moment to make a lateral move from Josh Allen to another quarterback if you can get something else. Because I agree with you. And I was a big Josh Allen backer during the draft season that he came out. But for him to sustain, last week he was in the intermediate passes, like you said, it's just not there right now. The other thing you're worried about is with Buffalo, I don't know if they're changing up the offense enough, and in so much as they are, like the run under center with Devin Singletary that went for the touchdown, that's not going to be good for Josh Allen. So if they actually are evolving in a way to keep the NFL off balance a little bit, that means less Josh Allen and more running game and more balance. You bring up a good point, though, about both of these quarterbacks in the sense that a more interesting measure of whether a quarterback is really doing poorly is a total offensive touchdown measure, right? Like if the offense is still producing touchdowns, like you said, variant strikes. There's going to be some weeks that, unless it's Tom Brady, there's going to be some weeks that the running game gets the touchdowns. There's going to be some weeks that the passing game gets the touchdowns. And it's only whenever the well runs dry that you really get worried. Allen just doesn't quite look the same. Can't do the same thing. Dallas gets Philadelphia this week on Monday night, so we'll get to watch Dak Prescott. But I've got to ask you, what's your other pet peeve? What's the other thing about fantasy football scoring? And you're right, we should get something to make running quarterbacks the Konami code, the retrieval coin.
Yes,
we need to get that out of the software.
Well, it was the point value of a touchdown. I think we should nerf him. I think we should make him at 4. It still needs to be a difference making thing because in the NFL, a touchdown is everything. So I totally get that. But it's just so wild that you can have these rando tight ends that one reception for 2 yards and a touchdown.
Right.
And now that guy, which no one played because the process was idiotic to play that guy, but now he is better than my George Kittle, who caught 4 passes for 30 yards or whatever. And it's just so it's a difficult internal battle that I have of understanding the value in the NFL of it's worth 6 points. So shouldn't it just be worth 6 points? And then now you've shifted the conversation to a whole other thing of, but this is fantasy football. And then you have the players who are like, I want this to mirror the NFL as much as we possibly can, but we're not playing the same game. So why should we not make the game of fantasy football the most balanced game that it can be based off of the variance and the inputs that we receive from the players who are actually getting things done? So that's the side I'm on of let's take a look at these things. Of the quarterback rushing one is my biggest pet peeve, though, of like Tim Tebow should not have had fantasy value.
Right. I mean, that's Exhibit A. We once cared about Tim Tebow in fantasy football. Whatever made that happen, we need that to stop.
He's the far poster boy of he was bad for NFL teams. I get that he won. The Broncos fans want to come at me, but he won all those games. No, he did not. Tim Tebow did not win those games except for the Pittsburgh playoff game which was a great pass, but he was an abomination out there. And yet, because he would end up with 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, you played Tim Tebow in fantasy football. So it irks me that the rushing is so overpowered compared to passing yards.
Yeah, and you really anticipated my reply. And it's similar to kickers, right? Because you anticipate me, you said, well, some people want fantasy football to mirror real football.
Right.
And because a touchdown is 6 points, and that seems overweighted, but that's how the game goes. And in fact, teams can completely outplay the other team, be the better team, and lose because on the 3 or 4 or 5 plays with the touchdown involved, they're on the wrong side of them. So in that way, and that's why I always say when kickers come up, because I know there's a lot of get kickers out of fantasy football. It's getting out of control, but now people are saying get tight ends out of fantasy. Whoa. Although we are moving towards something where I think you're going to have like a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end, and like 5 flex spots or something like that.
Sure.
It's going to be interesting. The great thing is all those wonderful people out there that are our listeners that consume what we create are experimenting and coming up with all kinds. It's almost like a board game where you have the dice and you have the pieces, but you can draw whatever you want on the board and make the game whatever you want. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Like, I mean, because we're Andy on our show is actually he likes having kickers, and Jason and I are both pretty opposed, and we managed to, in our league of record, our most important league, we transferred out. We replaced kickers with another flex spot, and people, it's often asked, I don't want a kicker in my league. How do I convey to my league that we should move kickers out and put a flex spot in? And I always say, okay, think about this. What is the last position you take in an NFL draft? You're like, well, my kicker or my defense. And the reason being, you're like, well, because I just don't care. Exactly. Yeah, we spend like as soon as the confetti goes off in the Super Bowl, we are already researching who am I going to be taking in next year's draft. How am I going to rank these players? We spend months and months and months putting in research, like creating new research, looking at new data points. How can we put this thing under a microscope and figure this out? Oh yeah, and I got to draft a kicker. So it's like we put so much time in, and we care so much about these other players that I just don't like kickers. And it also my personal vendetta of, I'm sure this happened to some other people. A couple years back, I'm in our semifinals, and I lose because Kaimi Fairbairn kicked 6 field goals or whatever.
Right.
And it's like that was, and I lost by 2 or 3 points or whatever. And it's just, it felt so bad that variance stopped me from moving on. And of course, I did the math. I would have won.
Yeah.
I would have won the championship. And so the randomness of a kicker having that many opportunities in 1 week, destroying a championship run, it feels so bad. But there are players like yourself. Our biggest thing about fantasy football is you should enjoy it. Enjoy the process. It's a game. It's a stupid game that we all take way too seriously.
Absolutely co-signed on that, yes.
But we love it. Like it's all about the community of the interaction with me and my hosts here and all the other guys and all the other co-managers in the league. Like it brings us all together in a very unique way. So if you're out there and you want to play tight end premium, okay. Is that fun? Is that fun for you and your friends to do? That's how the rules should be for your league.
Yeah, and it's funny because you draw out that scenario with kickers, and it makes me think of Minnesota and Greg Joseph last week, or Barry Anderson, or Blair Walsh. Sorry, Minnesota fans, or Scott Norwood. Sorry, Buffalo fans. Boy, this has been a rough show if you're a Buffalo fan. So it's funny because in some ways it wouldn't be football if there wasn't senseless things that determine the outcome of games. But like you said, we can do it however we want. Before we get back on track, I want to remind everybody, if you want to support the show, support Football Guys, subscribe, footballguys.com/join. We will have you looking over your shoulder for the rest of the season, helping you wade through all this senselessness. I want to go back to Dallas really quick because this was a hot button issue, on social media, on Twitter. last week, and I try not to do this, but every now and then I get a few responses with fangs bared. My community is usually great. Every now and then someone will come in. I said last week you should sell Zeke for 50 to 60 cents on the dollar. And let's remember, 50 to 60 cents on the dollar means to get a second round pick for him because he was a mid first round pick. So half of the value is about a second round pick, like a mid second round pick. I don't even know if you could get that for him today, Mike. Now, is that a reason to get back in on Zeke, or is what we saw what we're going to get for the rest of the season from the Dallas backfield?
What's crazy about what happened with Zeke and it is, at least to me, the way I'm reading the situation, it is 100% skewed by how good Tony Pollard was. Like Tony Pollard looked fantastic, and we already know you knew this about Pollard. He's fast, he's agile. Zeke is a bruiser who gets chunk yards but isn't likely to hit the home run. But Zeke last week was a top 10 running back in fantasy football. It only feels bad because Tony Pollard had over 100 rushing yards on in a
11 carries.
Yeah, on a similar situation, but it was 18 opportunities for Zeke. He got a rushing touchdown. I'm still in on Zeke as being a top 12 running back. Maybe the ceiling of when Zeke just comes in and wins you the week because he gets you 3 rushing touchdowns, maybe those days are gone. But I don't think he was necessarily drafted for that. It was not the big 3 this year with Zeke in there. It was
right.
McCaffrey, Cook, and then Kamara. That was our big 3 this year. Zeke was often at the end of the first round in a lot of drafts that I saw. So I'm still holding. And I believe that if Zeke had put up this stat line that he put up last week, and Tony Pollard was just mediocre on his carries, it would not feel the exact same way. Just remember, he was a top 10 guy this week. He really helped your fantasy squad at the running back position. And for sure he will be involved. Like Pollard, you want to project him being in on this timeshare now? Sure, but that's still a projection at this point. Like next week could come out and you could see 7 carries for Pollard, and then what do you do with his value? He's still extremely fragile and volatile, at least to me. Where, I think he should have played his way into a timeshare, but now we get into the whole other argument of don't overpay running backs in the NFL because you find and I don't want to get into that argument, but they are still financially committed to Zeke. He has been the bedrock of the team. Jerry Jones while he's the owner of the team, he still has heavy influence, and he's very loyal to his players. And I think that if the timeshare got out of control and one thing went wrong, like let's say they go up against Philadelphia and somehow Pollard has more touches than Zeke and they lose, you think the coaching staff isn't going to hear, why aren't you using my running back? I think that he's protected and he's safe. The big question for Zeke, where are these targets? That's where I'm like, it's because he's pass blocking. Yes, he is pass blocking, but he still is out there running routes as well. And it's very interesting, especially with like Michael Gallup went down. Your number 3 wide receiver went down, and still Zeke saw 2 targets. And that's been kind of one of those things that took Zeke into the next level. Was not only was he this monster on the ground, now all of a sudden Zeke is catching 60 passes a year, and that seems to have evaporated, unfortunately, for the value of Zeke. So the top 5 upside, probably not there, but just a real sturdy running back 1 that you don't have to worry about him losing his job completely. Might lose some of it to Pollard, but he'll still be the main guy.
Yeah, he has the same role as Nick Chubb. He might not be as good as Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is better.
Nick Chubb is, goodness gracious.
Yeah, right. Man. It's like Nick death Chubb, taxes and Nick Chubb,
He is so enjoyable to watch play football, and the fact that Kareem Hunt is there is just it sucks.
Well, yeah. I mean, in the sense that Chubb can't be a top 5 back with him there.
Yes, for the selfish fantasy football player, it sucks that Kareem Hunt is there, and Kareem Hunt is excellent as well.
So I think you laid out a good case that Ezekiel Elliott might be worth more than the perceived value today, but he's still worth less than the perceived value 2 weeks ago. And the passing game involvement, I mean, I just think that Pollard offers more and Zeke doesn't offer as much. Look, Zeke doesn't look the way he did 3 years ago, and he didn't look that way last year. Because you brought up rational coaching. This is the roller coaster. This is the roller coaster, right? Because you watch Zeke and Pollard last year and you say, Pollard has more juice. This should be a committee. But then you also bring in Jerry Jones and the money. And one of the things I noted, Mike, was on the day that Zeke's 2022 salary became guaranteed, there was just a pause. There was a moment in the Dallas media that they said, it's guaranteed now. Because like you said, it's the running back contract, the second running back contract discussion. And it was just noted, well, they're in. They weren't going to cut him anyway, but now they're really in. So then you thought, well, they're going to allot touches based on payment, based on compensation. And we didn't really allow as much, at least ADP wise, for an equitable timeshare, even though if you watch football, it seemed like it was very rational. And now Mike McCarthy, of all people, or maybe it's Kellen Moore, it's Mike McCarthy. I wonder sometimes if they let Mike McCarthy even do anything,
do they just tell him that he's in charge and he's not actually in charge?
Right. Like he's just a figurehead. Anyway, the point is that now it's rational coaching, and it's kind of like you rub your eyes. Rational coaching? I don't know how long that can last. And but I think you're right that Zeke might be a slight buy low right now. But let's get into Zeke. Let's do some either ors, like Zeke or another running back we're worried about. Okay, Zeke or Antonio Gibson.
I would prefer Zeke. But am I worried about Gibson? Not really. Because his ADP was interesting because if it captures just most of what he did last year in the second round, that's a perfectly acceptable pick. And then before the season starts, at least you still had the whispers out of Washington of quietly you're saying the name Christian McCaffrey workload that was thrown around a couple times. So it was in the range of possibilities for Gibson because that skill set exists in him. If they really cut him loose, I think he would thrive and he could be 75% of what Christian McCaffrey gives us. But J.D. McKissic is an excellent football player. He reminded us last week that he's still the 2-minute drill guy. But if you look at the routes run, Antonio Gibson is eating into what McKissic was, at least through 2 weeks. He's eating into what McKissic did last year, where on first and second down, he's running more routes. Now, it hasn't translated into a ton of incredible passing work for Gibson, but the opportunity is there. So, you still haven't seen the big touchdown week for Antonio Gibson. If you want to have concerns with him, it would be you have Taylor Heineke now, and J.D. McKissic was not part of the game plan at all in week 1 with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and now McKissic was back in week 2. So that's where that can be the concerns, and I think that those are fair. But I still believe that where you drafted Antonio Gibson, once the rushing touchdowns start coming in as they should, I think he has like 150 rushing yards or so around there without the score. And we know that you can look at a pretty simple formula of running backs once they hit 70-something yards, you should expect that they have a rushing touchdown for that amount of yardage. So good question for you. Are you a regress to the mean or are you a positive regression guy? What's your verbiage?
Okay. Whoa, the verbiage. I mean, I would say I just say regress to the mean because it's used so frequently, but I want to get into more like a philosophical existential discussion of is there even such a thing as a regression to the mean for some of these phenomena that we want to attribute it to, but that's a much bigger topic.
Okay. Because I use positive regression.
Right.
And because you inherently know what it means. And then
Right.
and then the grammar police, they're like, that's not actually what it is. Well, it's not progression. That word means something completely different. Right. And we screw up words so often on our show. And but I look at it as we've just coined a new phrase.
Exactly.
My rule of thumb is if I say a word and you know exactly what I meant when I said that completely made up word, that's a real word now.
You made a word. You just coined a word. Yeah. That's how language works.
To make words.
That's how language works.
Exist.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's funny. And see, the flip side of that, though, Mike, now we're really going to get into the weeds here. The flip side of that is when everybody uses something incorrectly, it can become correct, like irregardless or something like that.
Yes.
Because of the nature of language. So really what we need is forget about fantasy football. Let's get into some nickel and diming on language, because we have to use so much language. And our audiences are extremely kind and generous as we're going to, say things sometimes sometimes, Mike, I'll start a sentence and inside of my head, I think, how am I going to get out of this? How's this going to work out grammatically? Do you have an exit strategy? It's because when we have to talk for hours a week like we do, and we love it, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying sometimes you don't have an exit strategy. Do you need to have an exit strategy for Jonathan Taylor? Now,
man,
go ahead. Oh, good. See, I like that you're not just dismissing that right out of hand.
Yeah, it's not a dismissal. The man is not the man. I'm saying my comment was related to that Marlon Mack actually got some work this past week, and we'll see as that progresses how effective is he. Like Marlon, I don't think Marlon Mack understands how much is the weight that he is carrying, as he is now the face of can a running back return from an Achilles injury. Because in fantasy football, as to this point, an Achilles tear,
play taps.
Yes, it's a death blow to any running back. You cannot come back. We have not seen it happen. Some other positions, other sports. Apparently, if you're a Russian in the Olympics, you just come back like a week later. Probably assisted. Russia, right. I'm looking at you.
The Russian Olympic Federation. Let's be that guy.
Yes. Not the kind people of Russia, of course. Right. But can Marlon Mack prove us all wrong and actually come back this quickly and be an asset to a football team? Like that remains to be seen. But I mean, Jonathan Taylor getting stuffed over and over at the line, it's not troubling to me. He's just. The fact that he got those carries over and over, and despite failing, that's a positive to me. That says that more than likely he's going to be the guy. Every once in a while, you'll see Nyheim Hines get a goal line carry when they can try and feel like they're tricking the defense or catching him off guard. But it was funny because I'm a Clyde Edwards-Helaire truther, and which is harder and harder to hold on to that moniker.
Sure.
He's making it difficult. But that's instantly what I was reminded of, because those two running backs are so interlocked for fantasy football. In the rookie draft, it was Clyde, Jonathan Taylor. Which one are you going to take? Because the person number 2 is taking the other running back. And then you had week 1 of Clyde's rookie season where he got stuffed repeatedly at the line, and it was decided right then and there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire cannot be a goal line back. He's too small. We were concerned about this. And then you go to this week 2 where Johnny Taylor's at the goal line getting stuffed over and over. I'm like, maybe sometimes the blocking goes bad, and even when you are the Incredible Hulk, you still get stuffed at the goal line. So that's more of just an observation and a grudge that I'm holding on to for no good reason. But he's going to convert those into touchdowns. The bigger question is, who's his quarterback?
Yeah.
Is it Carson? Is it Eason? I don't know. Does Carson Wentz have 2 ankle sprains?
Right.
What is going on in Indianapolis?
Yeah, holding Jonathan Taylor in a fantasy league is kind of like Eagles holding the Colts first round pick, needing Wentz to play 70% of the snaps to go to the playoffs, or 75% of the snaps
right
to get that first round pick. As soon as you see those ankles, you see the injury report, like, oh boy, here we go. This isn't going to turn out well. And Jacob Eason is horrible. Sam Ehlinger going down is really terrible for this team, because at least he was a gamer, Taylor Heineke style. He's a gamer. Jacob Eason goes in, throws interception right away. An unbelievable gutsy performance by the Colts. The Colts, one of the things I highlighted on the recap show this week, Mike, was there were 4 teams last week that played like they were told the whole team was going to get executed if they lost. Tennessee, poor Minnesota. I'm not, I mean, you're not going to have a ton of sympathy, but it is Minnesota. And Baltimore, really just Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
And then the poor Colts. I mean, because they had that goal line stand. They had another Wentz interception in the red zone, which was just a careless little flip. They outplayed. Well, they did also get one of the worst punt attempts you'll ever see in your life that resulted in a touchdown for them. So I guess they got up both sides. But you see Carson Wentz in the ankles, and you think, okay, well, maybe whatever, he'll be out for a week or two. Who knows? But how long until he gets hurt again? How long until he gets hurt again? What are you really going to have in this offense with Jonathan Taylor? And he's the only piece that we really are hanging on to. Michael Pittman was all right last week. You mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let's dig in there, because I'm going to give you a chance to get on the pulpit and preach, or maybe talk yourself out of it while you're preaching, because this is a buy low moment for Edwards-Helaire. Darrell Williams comes in and gets the touchdown. He's not involved in the passing game. It was a highly visible Sunday night game, a thrilling game. Edwards-Helaire's fumble decided the game. Do you go in for more?
The soapbox for Clyde is more of me talking to the Kansas City Chiefs, where here's the scenario that you unfolded, and what I'm talking to Andy Reid and company. You took a running back in the first round, and you're Andy Reid's system. We've seen the success that Andy Reid has had with running backs, especially fantasy running backs, over and over. Now, you can a lot of people look at that and say, well, yeah, he had Brian Westbrook, he had Jamal Charles, he had LaShawn McCoy, and maybe Andy Reid is just really good at spotting running back talent. I think that's part of what he has done. It's not just been his system, where it's like the Shanahan system, you just, as long as you're fast, you're going to have success in this running scheme. It was, no, Andy Reid can find talent at the running back position. Then you have all the stories of, well, Patrick Mahomes talked to the team and they said, who do you want? And he said, I want Clyde.
Right.
Every other running back was available, including Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, like really, really top-notch talented running backs. But you went with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, whose calling card, he had 2 calling cards in college to me. He didn't fumble, that's big. And 2, he was a top-notch pass-catching running back. That's where he really specialized. And now you bring him into the system, and you turn him into a 2-down grinder. Like, what is happening here? If you wanted that, why would you not have drafted Jonathan Taylor? Like, it's so bizarre the way that they are using him, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, when they handpicked him over everybody else, and he's just not seeing the targets. Now, I get that Clyde is not – his athletic measurables are not off the charts. He's not as fast as Damian Williams. That we saw the classic wheel route that Andy Reid likes to run, where the running back wheels out, and Damian Williams probably houses the catch. Clyde caught it, got a nice gain, but he's not going to take it to the house. But you knew that when you were drafting him. So why did you pick him if you aren't going to use the skill set that he can really help your team with, and being an extra receiver out there? So it is baffling that this is what they're choosing to do. And because of that, he looks like a bust more and more and more every single week that passes, not just for fantasy football, but for real-life football. Why would you pay that position that much money when this is his usage? So it's maddening, and I don't see it getting better, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, so not exactly a buy low take. The hope is against the Chargers this week. who, Dallas went to the running backs. The running game had a lot of success for Dallas. Maybe Kansas City sticks with the running game a little bit more. But you're right, and you laid it out really well, because the great world famous Eric Stoner and I were chatting about this. Why did they take him in the first round? They took him in the first round. I think his route running, his ability to set up yards after catch opportunities, just how well he meshed with the pass concepts at LSU. And you watched what they did with Damian Williams. You thought, oh, this is going to be perfect.
Yes.
This is why Patrick Mahomes wants him. And we barely see him doing those things. We'll see. It's very emotional. Speaking of emotional, and I like the emotional side of fantasy football. I mean, that's actually what draws us back in. But I just want to throw it open, Mike, kind of wide, to ask, how is your season going so far?
You're a terrible man, Sig. I don't know if you know the answer already.
Oh, no. Well, that's okay. Hey, I had J.K. Dobbins on almost all of my important teams, okay? So my season was over before it started.
We intentionally keep the amount of leagues that we are in way down. I'm in, so we have our league of record, and it's a 3-keeper half point. We have our dynasty league, our main one, and then a listener league, and we do Scotty, the fishbowl and stuff. But that's really it. There are few leagues, and there are the two that my heart is fully into. Where when it's waiver day, and I'm excited to go do the waivers for those leagues, that's how you know that you actually care about that league.
It's not a chore.
So here's the story, and I shared it on the Fantasy Footballers, but here's week 1. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Arizona, we just legalized betting, so we have sports books here, and DraftKings is a big partner of ours, and it was like, this is it, man. This is week. Let's get after it. And I put together just this, because there was a bunch of bonus things for signing up for everything, so you had a whole bunch of free bets. And it was, well, I'm not going to take a free bet and try and pick one winner. Like, I'm going for it. I'm going to make this gnarly parlay that's going to pay out. And it was like a $25 bet that was going to pay out $40,000. Because it's asinine. It's asinine.
Yeah.
In my bet, though, part of it was the over on Tyson Williams' 65 rushing yards. Tyson had to score a rushing touchdown. That happened right away.
Yeah.
Sammy Watkins, over 25 yards. Second quarter, checked. And we keep going, and this game keeps going along. And I'm like, by the third quarter, entering the third quarter, I needed 90 passing yards and Mark Andrews to catch a touchdown. And I was going to make $40,000.
Very publicly, yeah.
And now it looks like, well, the time is running out. The yardage isn't going to get there. And then Lamar hits, I think it was Sammy, on this like 50-yard bomb, and he gets dragged down at about the 15. And they call a timeout, and it was – and that hit the over. That cashed the over on the Lamar passing yards. And it was turned into this moment of – we come back from commercial, and if Mark Andrews catches a touchdown, this is done. I'm going to hit on my first parlay, and just a bet that no one in their right mind would have put all of these things in. And I'm telling by this time I can't not tell my family what's going on, because I'm physically in this now.
Literally sweating. Literally the sweats.
Yes. Oh, yes. And my wife's like, what is going on? I'm like, when they come back, if this one particular guy catches a touchdown, I'm going to win a lot of money. She's like, how much? I'm like, I can't even say the number out loud.
I don't want to say.
And, of course, we come back from commercial. Mark Andrews is not even on the field, and Latavius Murray runs it in. And
there it is.
There it is. It's heart. Ripped up.
Indiana
it's
Jones
done.
Style. Yeah.
But I had Lamar and Tyson in my league of record, and I kind of needed a miracle comeback. After the Latavius Murray, that looked really bad. Then, somehow the Raiders are able to put a touchdown on the board, so now the Ravens have to go back and score. Lamar rips off a huge rush. I am now down by 0.7. And you know that the Ravens are just going to – they're going to run and kick a field goal here. Who gets to run it? Okay, Lamar runs again. I'm down by 0.3. The next play is a handoff. It goes nowhere. Now we're in third down. This is the final chance for Lamar. Lamar has to take this, and then they kick the field goal and win and everything. Lamar fakes the handoff, runs. I end up by 0.1. I have won. The victory is mine. The Ravens kick the field goal. The game is over. And then chaos ensues.
Right.
Of the Raiders are able to somehow score, go into overtime, and I'm up by 0.1.
You're okay. They're gonna get the ball. Yeah.
And if you watch the game, you saw what the Raiders did. Brian Edwards scored a touchdown to win the game. Everyone's hugging. We're walking off the field. Oh nope, called back. Derek Carr takes a rushing. Tries to sneak it in from the 1, gets stuffed. And then he throws a freaking interception in the end zone, which leads to the Lamar fumble, which makes me lose. I lost. After I won. I won by 0.1. And then the most impractical fumble that I can remember in a long time makes me lose. And so I lost. That night I lost $40,000. I didn't lose it, but I thought I was going to win $40K. And I thought I was going to win my matchup, and everything was terrible.
Yeah, I understand why you said stupid earlier in the show, now, like, with a little extra mustard. But that's it. Everybody has stories like that, and there's also some ridiculous stories too. My wife said the fastest she's ever seen me move was when Stephon Diggs caught the 3rd touchdown in Week 16 last year, because I needed like 41 points from him to win my championship, and that was it. That was it. So, there's you do it long enough, and there's lots of
you have both sides for
war
sure.
Stories. Yeah, and it's ridiculous, but like you said, the point is to have fun. It's the weightlessness. It's the feeling of whatever else scratches and claws at you in life. At least all you have to deal with is Lamar Jackson fumbling, and not that. While you're in your fantasy football world. Let's see. One last. I really want to. This is a special opportunity. By the way, I haven't even really said. It's like a fantasy football podcast summit or something like that. It's long overdue to have one of the fantasy footballers on here, Mike Wright, on the couch. And and like you said at the beginning of the show, it's about community. It's about the relationships, and there's a lot of truth to that in football too. Like as football. So with fantasy football, I think football is also a game of relationships too. So I'm just going to go off the rails early. You guys know you can find them at FF Hitman, the fantasy footballers. You know their work. You know how good it is. You know how they're going to be there for you. So let's start with FF Hitman, the handle. What's the origin story?
So it's a funny story, but it's also a really bad story at the same time. But here's the origination of it. Back when Andy and I started the podcast and we were working.
What year was that?
Ish. Eight-ish years ago.
Okay.
And we're trying to figure out like what's a good name, and we have this list. Footballers is on it, and one of the names on the list was the Fantasy Hitmen, and it's like, that's kind of hip. That's it's got some pizzazz to it. Yeah. But we end up going with the Fantasy Footballers. A few weeks into the show, because there's just the two of us. It was Andy and I. Once a week on our lunch break, we would record this show that one person listened to, and not even my parents. They wouldn't even listen to the show. But Andy was out of town on the day we record, so I end up bringing in someone else who was in our league and in our office where we used to work at a tech company. I was like, dude, football, just come in, be my co-host. I'll carry the show, but it'll be nice to have someone else there to bounce things off of. This show went off the rails rather quickly because I'm a goofier person, and I had the mic. It was me. No one was standing in my way. Andy, on our show, Andy's kind of the gatekeeper that keeps everything on track. He's the dad of the show, where when he misses and it's just Jason and I, it turns into it's a goofball hour. But we still have a lot of fun. But so it's just me talking to our league mate here, and I make this proclamation. I'm like, Andy's not here to stop me. You know what I'm doing? whenever you refer to me now, please refer to me as Mike the Fantasy Hitman Wright. And it was this stupid throwaway thing. And Andy listened to the show while he was gone, and he comes back. And he's like, Mike, that's so stupid. I'm like, I know, but it was fun to do. But then from that point on, anytime Andy would open the show, he's like, hey, Andy Holloway, I'm here with Mike Wright. I'm like, whoa, that's Mike the Fantasy Hitman Wright.
Right.
And I would kept interjecting because it would bother him so much. Like, I mean, it's like you're poking your brother, you know.
Sure.
The only reason I'm doing this is because it bothers you so much, and I guess I did it the correct amount of times where it transcended from just joke to bother my co-host into now that's the moniker that's stuck for my name.
Yeah, I think there's a Kurt Vonnegut quote like, "We are what we pretend to be, so watch what you pretend to be."
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one.
Yeah. And I keep thinking of Brett the Hitman Hart. You know, like you're a heel. You're a heel. You're a fantasy football heel at that point.
Which I don't know.
Oh, there it is.
That's Brett right behind me. Let me get.
That's fantastic.
I can't get out of the way. It's weatherman problem right there.
Right.
Yeah, I was in wrestling back in the '90s, man. And Brett and Shawn Michaels. Those were my dudes.
See, this is where this can really go, right? Because I like to tell the story of the first WrestleMania. So the first WrestleMania was an unbelievably big deal. I think I was about 10 or 11 at the time. And we had a Little League baseball game that day. And I don't even know how we did it in 1980. What was it, 85, 84, 86? I don't know. Where I remember being in the back of a flatbed pickup truck, and somehow we were watching it on TV in the truck. I don't even know how that happened.
Interesting.
But that's how, because like we were all piled in, then we were going to someone's house, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that it was that big of a deal that somehow someone's dad figured out, or mom figured out, how we could watch it in the back of a truck because we just didn't want to miss anything. Like we didn't want to miss King Kong Bundy pinning Special Delivery Jones, who did play in the NFL in like 9 seconds or something like that, and so many other amazing things. Wrestling. So you liked the heels then? You were drawn to the heels. My sister loved Rowdy Roddy Piper. I didn't get it, but maybe you can explain liking the heels in wrestling.
Man, I don't know. Well, Bret Hart was both. He was the babyface and the heel. And
sure.
Same for Shawn Michaels. I guess once he kicked Marty in the face, I guess he was kind of a full-time heel after that. I don't know. I have a pretty sturdy contrarian streak inside of me, so that's I assume it's that draws me towards the heels, the bad guys in wrestling, where it's Hulk Hogan. I mean, it's fun, you know, to me,
sure.
But it's like, but he's just Joe America out there, you know, like give me something interesting here, give me a reason to really get riled up.
I get it. No, and I can remember our favorites back in the day were like Jimmy Superfly Snuka, because who didn't like to pretend you were Jimmy Superfly Snuka? I loved Junkyard Dog. Coco Beware would bring the parrot and put the parrot on the ropes. All these little things, man. It was quite a world, and I know it continues to be an ever-growing, ever-burgeoning world of wrestling. But to bring it back to the fantasy footballers and your path,
we can keep going wrestling if you want.
Oh, you know, one of the reasons I'm all I can do with wrestling is like story time. I can just go back to the 80s because I can just go back to, I mean, I'd love, for instance, you mentioned heels and give us something to work with. The Iron Sheik is still, I'm going to sound like a Pittsburgh, Iron Sheik is still doing it and doing it well. And it's kind of what he's done after wrestling is almost as big as wrestling. But I don't have a lot of good contemporary references, and I'm afraid I'm just going to look old. But
I'm with you. I went to I've been out for a long time, and then I went with Jake Seeley. I went to the Royal Rumble was here a couple years back, and he's like, I know you watched at one point. I got an extra ticket, so I went. I had no idea who anybody was, you know, as they're all like, it's the Royal Rumble, so it's 40 different people or whatever getting announced. I'm like, now wait, who's this guy? But everyone's just a name now. The cool characters, you know, the Undertaker, Doink the Clown, the Big Boss Man. These people who all had a shtick, that's like gone now. It's all John Cena's, and it's just a first and a last name, and they're just a person. And I'm like, what happened? What happened to the showmanship? What happened?
Right. And hence FF Hitman. You're bringing the
Yes.
showmanship because I'm just Sigmund Bloom. So many of us at the beginning in the Wild West days of Twitter, a lot of people had handles like that. And then it's shifted like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years in. And everybody just went by their name. But you're keeping it alive in fantasy
You also
football.
have a unique name, like Sigmund
Well,
Bloom.
that's true.
I'm Mike Wright.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, but Wright is a good name for a fantasy football analyst or anything where you're a prognosticator.
Yeah, touche.
You're Mike Wright. Okay, I want to ask you though, just because I want to go back down memory lane with you, the fantasy footballers, because as you said, it was 8 years ago. Because there is no such thing as an overnight success, and it's the work and it's brick by brick, listener by listener. But I want to ask you, what was the moment that you knew that maybe this wasn't just going to be something you did on your lunch break? That this wasn't going to be something you did that nobody listened to, not even your parents.
Yeah. So the couple kind of like key moments were. We decided to start the podcast right after the Super Bowl. We treated, I think a differentiator for us was when we sat down and we were going to do this, we said, we're running a business. It's a podcast, but there is a business aspect that has to be handled. So we kind of tried to approach things through that lens. And part of that decision was, do we wait until training camp? Because that's when people are back in fantasy football and the interest starts growing. Or do we just start it now? And the Super Bowl had just taken place. And it was, well, we want to talk about fantasy football all the time. I wish after the Super Bowl, I wish podcasts kept putting stuff out. I wish that the SiriusXM channel didn't go to baseball. Like, I want to talk about football. And there's probably people out there that agree with us. So we started it then. And as we're moving, through time, putting out a couple episodes, a week or whatever, we got to July, and you just saw this hockey stick of listenership when we would look at our stats and of how many downloads are we getting, and it was, wow, this is really surprising how many people are starting to come in, and then it just kept going. It wasn't just like a surprise peak. People checked out the show and then they bailed out. It was, the numbers are going up, and we're starting to hear from people on social media. So it was, well, guys, I think we can do this. I think we can make this a full-time job. We have to commit. Once August hits, we need to do 5 shows a week if we're going to try and compete with, the big dogs out there, compete with the networks. But I think we can do it. So we did. That's what we did. Is August hit, and then I won't get into the whole story of like taking bad ad deals of you're just trying to buy a month of income at a time just so you can all stay alive and pay your rent, feed your family, and that stuff. But a moment that stands out of not a, I mean, for back of letter phrase, not a you made it moment, but just and I'm sure you understand this.
Yeah.
When you're recording, it's just like right now, it's just us. We know that there are a lot of people listening, but it is just us. And for the 3 of us, that's the only people I would talk to. We would do the podcast, but you don't actually see the listener. They don't exist. They're just a download, but you know that they're listening. So a couple years back, we went on and we did some live shows. We took the podcast out on the road, and we're like, well, man, hopefully people show up and like want to hang out and watch us record a show. We do this show up in Minnesota. It's our first stop on where we were going to do a 5-show tour, quotes of, but 5 shows. And we go out. First off, we get into the room. This is impossible. Like I've looking at these seats. I am counting these seats. You're telling me that this show is sold out. Like you are lying. You are lying right now to my face. There is no way that this room is going to be full of people come showtime. But sure enough, the lights come on. We go out there to do the show, and the welcome that Minnesota gave us was incredible. Of this room is packed with hundreds of people. They're all here to watch us talk about the fake game of football. So it was crazy. And then what took this to the next level, we all sit down after the greeting and we say, everybody ready? Okay, we're going to record. So we hit the theme song, and the room goes bananas. Like an eruption.
They're playing. It's the hit.
And just they're cheering. No, the show's starting.
Yeah.
And it was so loud and overwhelming that, and it's still up on YouTube. You can go back. Once the graphics stop and it goes to the camera, you can see both Jason and myself like emotionally holding back because we're both about to just full ugly cry because we are so overwhelmed by the love and the support that these people are showing us. So it was that crazy moment of, I know that people are listening, but I don't know because I don't interact with them, in a physical space ever. From our little room to this show where there's hundreds of people just all screaming and hooting and hollering, having a great time. That was this moment of like, I guess they're real people. I guess they exist, and I guess they do listen to the show.
Yeah, and I think I'm afraid to do that because I'm afraid people will show up and say, "That's it. That's it. That's all." Really? I don't know. No, it's a wonderful story, and I think that one of the things that really connects not just football guys and the fantasy footballers, but the whole fantasy football community is that love, really, and a sense of Joe Bryant, Football Guys, likes to say, like, we're all, he cites a quote, like, we're all walking each other home at night. We're keeping each other company, we're making the ride a little easier, whatever it is. And it's really incomprehensible, as you laid out, that fantasy football podcasts would be one of the main vehicles of that. But I think we get into a lot of deeper discussions there about our lives, the pace of our lives, and our lack of ability really to slow down. And when you're listening to a podcast, you do kind of slow down. Although I know people that listen to them 2x speed. So
I
don't know. But
I am an
anyway.
artiste. Please recognize my art at the right speed.
Exactly. Do you watch a movie on fast forward? No, but and really the real show is about to start. But unfortunately, we've already gone a little over the hour. But I think that no matter what we talk about on individual topics and advice, it really is the community. And it really is, and I don't want to speak for you, Mike, but our audience is so gracious, so kind. And then and they indulge us. It's amazing that we can get praise just for doing something that we like to do anyway. So it's very generous, and it's generous today as we get a chance to have the first of many, I'm sure, crossovers between the fantasy footballers, football guys, and everybody who comes through the couch here, because it's such a great community. You all are the ones that make it a great community. We're just feeding off of your energy, and we're happy to be in that spot. As always, folks, thank you for giving us your precious time and attention, the most precious thing you have. And as always, stay classy.